So we're gonna, all right, restarting. So taking the teachings of the Nation of Islam into junior high and high school, what did you encounter from the other students? Were they white? Were they African American? Your classmates? And you know, what did they know about Islam? I'm really curious.
Very little.
Okay.
Very
little. I'm really curious. Can you talk about that? Like,
yeah.
What did you know about Islam in the 1950s? You know,
yes. Because the Nation of Islam was so new at that time, hardly anybody really recognized or knew what Muslims were, and they would make fun of us, especially myself and my brothers and sisters that were right under me. You know, oh, you all are Muslims, and they wouldn't say it like that. They would, you know, poke fun of us, and then plus we were dark complexion because my father was very dark. My mother was light brown, but it made most of us dark, and so they would call us blacks. And it didn't make me feel too good when we first left and went to public school. It was kind of a very, what can I say, just a very challenging time for me. Okay. And of course, being 12, 13, 14 years old is hard enough anyway.
Right.
And then on top of just coming from a situation where you felt very comfortable and you know you had people caring about you, and then now coming into a situation where people knew nothing about your religious belief, and seeing you and making fun, it did not feel very comfortable at all.
And what is the timeline? Is this like the late 1950s or?
Yeah, this was like maybe 57, 58, 59.
Okay.
And you pointed out your tone, your skin tone. Now, were these sneers regarding your skin tone by other African Americans?
Other African Americans, basically, because in the school it was very few Caucasians. I can count on one hand how many Caucasians, and but basically it was other blacks that would poke fun of you.
You know, that's a good question, because my mom shared similar experiences that, you know, coming up in the 1950s and going to public school, you know, other African American students would tease her, you know, like if you called someone black, it was actually a way of starting a fight back then. It was like, you know, this was before the sense of, you know, pride and being black. So my mother distinctly remembers that was a way to start a fight.
And then it was said in a negative tone, in a negative, you old blackie, you know, something like that. So it was a put down. It was definitely a put down.
Now, I want to talk about the 1960s. I think this is a good way to kind of segue into that. Did you discern that there were any changes going into the 1960s and everything the 1960s entailed in terms of civil rights movement, Black Power, Black Panthers, you know, James Brown and Black is Beautiful, and these kinds of messages, you know. Did anything change in the 1960s? And
yes,
can you talk about the 60s?
In the early 60s, I graduated from high school in 1963, and I can remember that President Kennedy, this was the era when he was coming into office, and you know, he was assassinated, and I can remember feeling very much in awe because we had such high expectations for him that he was going to begin to make changes and do things for us as a black people. And like you say, I do recall that many attitudes began to change during the 60s, that black people became more aware of who they were and began to love themselves better as a result of the civil rights struggles and things that Dr. King and others were doing at that time. So yeah, I do remember that there were beginning to come into play a lot of changes during that time.
Did you or anybody in your family have any sort of direct involvement with civil rights activism?
We did ours through the Nation of Islam at that time, and basically, as a matter of fact, my father did know Malcolm X. Malcolm X was, at that time, he had come out of prison, and one of his brothers lived like within walking distance from us where we lived. And so Malcolm would confer with my father and my mother. And as a matter of fact, I think my father gave him one of his first jobs. I told you my father was a construction worker, and Malcolm was a very thin and frail person, so he could not really do the construction work very well. But I can remember him, like my father sharing with me that he would, what is it when you wave the flag, or you can have people to go and ride by. So he did those kind of things for my father's company for a little while, and but that was not anything that he really felt comfortable with. My mother also at that time was a distributor for Stanley Home Products, which was a type of product that you would sell to people. She in order to stay home and take care of family, but still make some money, bring monies into the family, she would do that. And so Malcolm would come and go like out on different demonstrations with her. So so that's to share with you that my family did know Malcolm very well, and I can remember him coming into the school, into the classroom. That was back when we were at the University of Islam, and he would look at us and he would say, those are Brother James Yax's children, knowing that, because of the color hue that we stood out in the classroom, and he knew who we were. And it would make me feel very special when he would do that.
There were probably very few people who can say that Malcolm X came to their school, so wow, that's really nice. Did you have a chance to ever talk to him, or?
No, I didn't. Okay. I didn't, because I was a very young girl at the time. But I just know what my family told me about it, my mother and father.
And I want to talk more about your mom. So Malcolm X went on, you said on presentations?
Yeah, presentations, when she would go. And as a matter of fact, my mother tells us that this was one of the ways that Malcolm learned to be able to go before the public and talk. Was by starting with her when she would be presenting her little spiel about telling about the products, and he would learn how to, he would do the same thing that she did. And he was he was a person who really was very personable and knew how to meet and talk to the people. And so the women really liked him, and she was able to get a lot of sales, and he was able to make a lot of sales at that time.
Now that is a piece of history you will not read in a textbook. Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Wow.
You're welcome.
That is amazing. Now, I'd like to hear more about, so when you graduated high school, and then what did you do after that?
Okay, what did I do? I can remember that I was thinking about, I went to junior college. It was called Henry Ford Community College. I went there for a couple of years, and then also I was working for Detroit News as a copy girl, meaning that when the editors would send their copies to to and from the editor, I would intercede and make sure that it got to where it was supposed to go. Because I was interested in writing, and so that was my way of getting in with the editors and learning little things about how to make changes on copies and how to do things. So that was what I was going to do. I was either going to teach or I was going to be a writer.
Okay.
So teaching came out on top. But those were the couple of things I did. I went to junior college, and then I worked at Detroit News for a couple of years. And from there, I met my first husband.
Okay.
Got married.
Okay, I'd love to hear more about your marriage, but I want to talk a little bit more about women in the Nation of Islam. How did the Nation of Islam view women going to college, seeking higher education, outside employment? What was the...
I can remember a double standard with that. I can remember that on some end that we were encouraged to go to school and go and get higher knowledge, because I remember the Honorable Lynice Muhammad always saying to prepare ourselves and to make ready for the future and do things that we need to do. But then I can remember many of our people, like the captains and the lieutenants, seemingly discouraging us from doing that. So I received mixed message, but my family always very much encouraged us, their children, to go back and get a higher education. So my mother and father, and so, but mine was interrupted when I decided to get married.
Okay. So when you got married, you know, did you stop working for a while, or did you?
Yes, I did.
All right.
I did.
Okay.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, I left Michigan and we lived in a place called Jackson, Mississippi. We moved to Jackson, Mississippi. Lived there for about 7 years.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And during that time, did you work outside the home, or you were at home?
I was pretty much a homemaker.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And you had your children, were they born in Mississippi?
Yes.
Okay.
My 2 children were born in Mississippi. As a matter of fact, I was a mother of 3 children, but I lost the middle one. So I have 2 grown children. Mm-hmm. And they both were born in Hinds County, Mississippi.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And your husband was a minister?
He was a Muslim minister for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And as a matter of fact, I think he was one of the first ministers there in Jackson, Mississippi. And very good, articulate brother, but just didn't know how to mix being a husband and father to me with also being a minister.
Yeah.
And so it didn't work.
You know, I'm looking at the Nation of Islam and temples, and I haven't really been able to find out a lot about temples in the South. So, did Mississippi have a temple?
Yes, yes. But what he did was he and several other brothers, what they did was they set up a house. He also did construction work.
Okay.
And they tore out some walls, and they were able to renovate a house and use that as a mosque.
Okay.
And at the time, like I said, when we started in Michigan, there we only started with maybe 15 or 20 people.
Right.
Was this very small? This was in Jackson. Mississippi.
Okay. What was the temple called?
Just I don't remember the number, but it was just Temple of Jackson, Mississippi.
Okay. Because Atlantis was temple number 15.
Yes,
so
I don't
I'm trying
remember.
to figure out. Well, you know, what was before that? You know, obviously temple number 1 was in Detroit, number 2 in Chicago. I know number 7 was Harlem, right?
And I think 3 was Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Okay.
Look like, I'm not sure, but I know Wisconsin comes in there somewhere.
Okay.
I don't remember the numbers. But there's a listing somewhere, I'm sure, that we can give to you.
Okay, well, let's move back down south. And how are we doing for time? We're okay? All right, so moving back, you know, so you went from Alabama. Your journey took you from Alabama to Inkster and Detroit. Now back to the, you know, now in Jackson, Mississippi, so kind of back in the deep south.
And I found the people there were very,
to hear your thoughts
very
about the
wonderful.
culture.
They you know, of course, we pretty much were with the black people that were there. And I just found them to be very, just a really kind-hearted, very giving people who were just family-like. Like I can remember one family, Miss Jo Mary Smith. She was the mother, would you believe, of 17 children.
17.
And
wow.
She adopted myself and my ex-husband. And she, even though she didn't understand the religion, you know, the Nation of Islam, but she knew that we were very conscientious about our diet.
Right.
And so what she would do is she wanted to be inviting to us and wanted us to come to her home. And so she bought a whole set of cookware. And she would only use this cookware for myself and my husband when we came in, and would cook us a special meal. Just a complete meal, everything, chicken and cobbler and greens and everything, and she would not use any hog, and that because she knew that we were Muslim. But just a wonderful individual. And so, and I remember most of the people there just being very, just wanting to reach out and be with each other and help during that time in Mississippi. It was kind of a hard time for many because If you can recall that during that time, Mayor Medgar Evers was murdered, and several things had happened in Mississippi at that time. But the African American people were very conscientious and very much stuck together at that time to help women.
Now, you said that you are a housewife. As the wife of a minister, what role did you play in the Nation of Islam and in the community as well?
That's a good question. The Muslim women pretty much looked up to me to set an example, because most of them had not been at all acquainted with Islam and with the dress, with teaching them about the MGT and GCC class and all of those things that I had learned at number one. So many of the things I had to in turn try to share with them as best that I could, even though when I was at number one, I was like a young girl and a teenager, so much of it I did not know, but I would share as much as I could learn from my mother and other sisters that I would come in contact with.
Did you conduct those classes for Mississippi?
I think myself and other sisters, we would invite other sisters to come and share with us. Yes.
So what year was this? Because yeah, I'm trying to figure out.
I married Thomas Shabazz in 1967.
Okay.
So 67 till about 73, we stayed married.
Okay, so from 1967 to 1973, because I'm trying to figure out if the Temple, Mississippi predated the Temple number 15 in Atlanta, or did Atlanta?
No, it was about the same time,
Okay.
because I can remember my ex-husband at the time, he did have correspondence with the minister who was here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Was that Minister Abdul Rahman?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
All right.
it was.
Wow. Okay.
It was. So yeah, my ex-husband did talk to him.
Okay. And Ms. Allison asked a really important question about Mississippi and the role of the women in the Nation of Islam. I had a question more about, I guess, was there a huge cultural difference going from, say, Detroit to Mississippi? You know, did you sort of experience Jim Crow or, you know, segregation? Was that still,
Yes.
I would imagine in Mississippi
Very
at the time
much.
it was probably,
It
Can you
very
talk
much,
about
it
that?
very much was so. I can remember that there were certain places that we, as African Americans, could attend, and certain places we could not. Especially like the stores and, you know, like movies or just everyday places that there were certain places that you as a black person could attend, and certain places that you did not. Even to the schools at that time, because I think I had gone to Utica Junior College for maybe a few months while I was expecting, and that it was predominantly African American, and I was asking, well, you know, don't you all go to school with Caucasian? They said, no, well, this is just our school here.
okay.
And so that was a difference. It was, and then, you know, with a lot of churches, I can remember a lot of churches there in Mississippi, as are here in Georgia. But yeah, it was very segregated, very segregated.
With this huge cultural difference and Mississippi playing a huge role in the civil rights movement, did you and your husband ever play a role in the civil rights movement?
I'm trying to think of what role did we play. I don't really remember doing that very much at that time.
You know, if I recall, I think the Nation of Islam was, I recall that they were a little critical of some of the civil rights leadership. Yeah, you know, I remember Imam Pleman kind of talking to me about, you know, because of the Nation of Islam's teachings, you know, there was a certain, it was, you know, maybe that time kind of hard to forge common ground between the Nation of Islam and the Christian church. You know, because the Nation of Islam is saying that, you know, yeah, that Islam is the original, you know, religion of the black man, and so,
and then it was saying that you don't integrate with the Caucasian.
And that's
and that was what Dr. Martin Luther King was more into, let's work this out together, let's, you know, try to integrate, and let's, you know, work as a people together. And in the Nation of Islam, we said no, that we want to have our own independence. We want to set up our own grocery stores, our own whatever, you know, and our own schools. So it was.
And was there a school, a University of Islam in Jackson?
Not really. I taught so far as, I didn't have a degree or anything at that time, but I had like a preschool program where I would teach my daughter and other children that were, say, 3, 4, and 5 years old.
Okay.
But we didn't have a school per se at the time.
Okay. Now that's a good transition to Atlanta, because I want to know, so did you come to Atlanta from Jackson?
As a matter of fact, I went back to Michigan and stayed a few years.
Okay.
And then transitioned from Michigan in 1981. In 1981, here to Atlanta.
Okay, and why did you come to Atlanta?
You know, I had come on a bus, on a tour bus, when Imam Muhammad was giving a special lecture. And just for curiosity, I guess, just wanted to know what's Atlanta. I had always heard so much about Atlanta, and that African Americans here were so progressive and different things were happening. And so I think it was more curiosity. And I stayed for 3 days, and I fell in love with the city.
Okay.
And I said, someday that's where I want to live.
Okay.
And so, like I said, husband and I had gone through separation and a divorce, and so this was the place that I decided to come. I think within, this was about 78.
Because I heard that Imam W.D. Muhammad gave a speech in Atlanta in 1978 that was really
I think so. I think that was it.
Okay.
I think that was it, yeah,
Okay.
78.
1978, okay.
Now going back to your transition from Mississippi back to Detroit, Michigan, when did you make, from my understanding, you made the transition to Orthodox Islam upon the death of Honorable Elijah Muhammad in 1975?
Yes, it was. I think though, during that time, because I was going through so much with my marriage and different things, I didn't really come into a better understanding until about 77 or 78.
What?
So that would have been the time that I would have begun to make changes.
How did you encounter Orthodox Islam, and what influenced you in making that transition?
That's a good question. I think the thing that most impressed me, because I had lots of questions in my mind all the time, and one of the things that I questioned was when we said that the Caucasian, all white people are devils. That was the thing that had always been you know, brought up to me when, as a little girl, being brought up. And I couldn't understand that. So I think when Imam Muhammad made that distinction of saying that it, you know, it's not what a man looks like, it's his character, and that, you know, that the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah be pleased with him, had taught that the best of us are he who is most careful with his duty. All of those kind of things really put that on my mind, that this is what I want. I think also a thing that our question was that man was God. You know, that they were saying that Allah had come in the person of Master Farad Muhammad. I questioned that. So all of these things came into play, and it made sense when Imam Muhammad came into office, and he explained better to us that Allah, who Allah was, and how, you know, that those, that all of us are just as equal to each other as long as we're careful with how we treat each other.
So were you influenced after the 78 speech of Imam Muhammad in Atlanta, or before you went to
I think that was the start for me.
Okay.
Now,
So,
was there an impact, this transition from the Nation of Islam's beliefs, like you said, and the idea for Muhammad being God incarnate and so on, and Elijah Muhammad being a messenger, that's a big theological shift to make, to Orthodox Islam. Did it impact your marriage in any way? Because you were married to a Muslim minister, and I had heard that for some of the ministers, making that transition was challenging.
it was. During that time, we were more or less separated.
Okay.
And so his influence was not that big on me at that time.
Okay.
And so I was beginning to put things more in perspective from my own point of view and trying to understand Islam better.
Okay.
So,
How did you convey that to your children? Were there any strategies that you used to sort of disseminate that this is a new approach,
you know, I can recall that I never really stressed that to my children about Caucasian being devils, and that I allowed them pretty much to have their own friends and to try and just be human to one another and to others. And both my children can tell you today that even during that time they had Caucasian friends.
Okay.
So I guess I was kind of on that edge of that part was not important to me.
Okay.
Of ostracizing and saying, that Caucasians are devil.
Right.
So since you and your husband there was a little influence of your husband on you, was there influence of your husband on your children's learning and upbringing while you were practicing Orthodox?
Not really. I think I had the most influence on them because after we separated, he did not have very much input with them. He would maybe visit them a couple of times a year, 2 or 3 times a year. So unfortunately, he, did not really play that bigger role in their lives. Well, maybe fortunately or unfortunately, to the degree that now I think if you were to ask either of my children what do they believe, they would definitely say that they believe in the teachings of al-Islam as taught by Imam Muhammad, and that they better appreciate the Quranic teachings than they would the Nation of Islam.
When you came to Atlanta, you were a single mother. So, did you, when you moved to Atlanta, what kind of support did you find in the Atlanta Muslim community? If you could discuss how the community received you. Did you settle into the Atlanta Masjid community and specifically?
I did visit several other masajids. As a matter of fact, I went to the 14th Street Masjid, I forget what, El Farouk. I attended there, and I attended, what was the other, West End Masjid. But I think the Atlanta Masjid of al-Islam welcomed me most, and I think it was because I was a teacher on Bankhead at their school, and of course most of my parents attended over here, attended the Atlanta Masjid of al-Islam. And so yes, they did welcome me with open arms, and pretty much I was able to get involved in some of the committees at that time, so that I could feel very much a part of things. So I think that was my reason for choosing the Atlanta Masjid of al-Islam, was mainly because of my teaching at the school and just feeling more welcome here.
Right. Because El Farouk Masjid, okay, you pause?
Yes.
Okay,
Please.
we're going
Thank
to pause
you.
for a second. Yeah, El Farouk